The Baltimore Ravens defeat the Atlanta Falcons in week 2 of the 2024 preseason, 13-12. We talk about everything that happened, players who bounced back, players who stepped up, a stock report, all that and much more coming up next here on this live instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We are here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, as always, for being here today, this afternoon, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day here on this Saturday, in your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you, all podcasting platforms, so video form on YouTube, audio form wherever you get your podcasts. We have you covered with Ravens 5 days per week, plus obviously bonus content like these instant reaction episodes and so much more. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. The Ravens, they get their first win of the 2024 preseason, and they defeat the Atlanta Falcons 13-12. It was a little bit of a spicy ending as the Falcons actually drove down the field late, scored a touchdown, but the Ravens held strong on the 2-point attempt, as obviously in the preseason there are no ties where you go to overtime. A tie is a tie, but I think the Falcons did the smart thing by getting some experience in that 2-point conversion drill. But the Ravens hold out, Tavius Robinson being the factor there, stopping that run. But there is so much more to talk about in the game. We're going to be getting into Trenton Simpson, David Ojabo, Josh Johnson had a bounce-back performance. There were definitely some struggles, particularly in the trenches. We will dive into that as well. So, man, we're going to be diving into it all here on this episode. We'll also do a bit of a stock up, stock down report, talk about who performed well overall and who didn't. Plus, we'll have a bonus episode coming out tomorrow, diving more into that fact. Plus, John Harbaugh speaking to the media right about now as we record this. So we're going to be diving into his updates as well, because he didn't seem happy about one particular play that happened, which we will dive into. So really appreciate everybody that is here. David, you're my man as always. You know that. Appreciate you. Just a bit outside is in here. Appreciate you. Sage Mode. We got Joe in the chat. Raven76 Be More. Man, we have a lot of people already in here. Let's talk about the game. I think, first of all, something that we have to acknowledge, and I just want to say this right off of the bat. We all have to give a little round of applause for Josh Johnson here. Look, rightfully so. We talked about him all week on this show. Everybody was talking about him. Man, this Ravens backup quarterback situation is a little concerning and a little worrying. And I think Josh Johnson was kind of at the forefront of that conversation. Should it be Ryan Tannehill? Could Tyler Huntley be in the conversation if he gets cut by Cleveland? I know a lot of people didn't love the Huntley conversation. But Josh Johnson bounces back in probably the biggest way that you can after having a pretty poor performance in week 1. Does not have an incompletion. 11 of 11 on the day, 120 yards, and that touchdown to Owen Wright out in the flat. Man, you got to give flowers where it's due, got to give credit where it's due. And here on Locked On Ravens, obviously what we do and what I try to do every single day is obviously criticize where criticism is due and then praise where praise is due. And I think Josh Johnson deserved criticism last week, but he certainly deserves praise for what he did in the game today against Atlanta. He looked poised. He was hitting on long completions. Multiple receivers got involved in the deep passing game. That's something we talked about here on the show, right? We said, man, it'd be awesome if Baltimore was able to work their deep passing game a little bit more. And while they weren't taking deep shot after deep shot after deep shot, they were pushing the ball down the field and pulling up the box score stats here. Obviously, Dayton Wade had the long one on the throw from Emory Jones, and we'll certainly get to that. But I thought the Baltimore made an effort to get the ball down the field, and that is something that obviously with the regular starters, Lamar, everybody in there, we want to see that anyway. But I thought that they did a great job of doing it. And look, in terms of yards per pass, Baltimore had 8.5 yards per pass on the day. And I thought that was indicative of just what the team did as a whole. You look at some of these wide receivers. You have Keith Kirkwood with a couple of really long gains. Tylan Wallace had a 31-yard catch. Obviously, Dayton Wade had his 50-plus yard touchdown. I thought that was a really quality thing that the Ravens did, and I'm glad that we got to see it here on full display. And yeah, Rick saying he did look a lot better this week. Absolutely, Rick, 100% agree with you. And Dylan, I see your comment about Falele. We're going to be talking about that offensive line in just a couple minutes. I want to get to a few more things first before we talk about the offensive line, but I do know that's a huge story, so be sure to keep it locked on here, Locked On Ravens. We are going to get to it. Josh Johnson was great. I think all three levels made a lot of great throws. Again, not one incompletion for him. But Emory Jones, he was a guy that last week we were like, man, what an unfortunate set of circumstances. The game is kind of like technically over, like this is going to be a tie and whatever. And then he comes in for one play and ends up fumbling the ball to get, Eagles kick the field goal to win. He actually got a real opportunity because let's be honest, right? That one play was not a real opportunity. He comes in today, goes 7 of 9 for 100 yards. Obviously, the big touchdown to Dayton Wade, that 56-yarder being the big one. Want to know passer ratings for today? We're going to exclude Devin Leary from this conversation. We didn't really get to see a ton of him today. Josh Johnson had an 142.4 rating. Emory Jones had an 150 rating, about close to as perfect as you can get for both of those guys. I was impressed. The backup quarterback position, obviously nothing is set in stone yet. I think they still need one more week of good performances at that position to make me feel 100% good about what they did and what they are and where they are right now. But we were about to have a conversation if it didn't go well about, they need to get somebody in here right now. Like this cannot wait anymore. But we're not there now because of what Josh Johnson and Emory Jones did today. In the running game, it was really the Chris Collier show. Obviously, Owen Wright had the touchdown reception, but on the ground, Owen Wright averaged 1.1 yard per carry. And I'm not pinning this all on the running backs. I think the offensive line certainly had their fair share to do with how the running game performed today. Chris Collier went 12 for 29. John Kelly, newly signed guy, went 5 for 21. And then the quarterbacks had 8 and 4 yards apiece between Josh Johnson and Devin Leary. But the run game wasn't very impressive to me today. They ripped off a couple of gains here and there, but the longest run of the game for the Ravens, any ball carry, was 8 yards. Whereas the Falcons, on the other hand, just if we want to compare, because it is a pretty ugly comparison, the Falcons had a bunch of long runs. Jace McClellan ended up just gashing the team. Spencer Brown had his moments. I mean, the Falcons averaged 4.9 yards per carry, while the Ravens averaged 2.4. So that is that is what I think was one of the weaknesses was Baltimore's run defense and the rushing offense. So just the run game in general, not good for Baltimore. But Dayton Wade absolutely burned. I mean, he fried his defender. He fried his defender. That double move. It kind of reminded me of the Demarcus Robinson play a couple years ago where he came in and did that to a Commanders defender. I can't remember who it was. And then I think Demarcus Robinson did it to Eli Apple later in the season. So Demarcus Robinson loved those double moves. But the receivers, I thought they were getting open. The catches were great. I thought that a lot of guys improved their stock. And that's a good thing because I don't know how many receivers the Ravens are going to keep, but between guys who improved their stock today, Wade, Keith Kirkwood, Tylan Wallace, Malik Cunningham, Anthony Miller, I thought all those guys had great games. And they are fighting for 1, maybe 2 roster spots. So that's 5 guys fighting for 1, maybe 2 roster spots. So we're going to see how they end up doing this. Is it going to be 6 wide receivers? Are they going to keep 7? Are they going to cut it down to 5? I don't know what their plan is, but I thought a lot of the receivers, Anthony Miller got involved. I think he had 3 straight catches at one point. All 3 of his catches came kind of consistently and consecutively, and that's what we've kind of heard out of training camp. Dayton Wade, he's been a guy all training camp. Kirkwood's gotten buzzed. Tylan Wallace, obviously. But I think as you get further and further down on that depth chart, you do need to be able to play special teams. We know Tylan Wallace can do that. Dayton Wade, I think, can provide value there. But I think if you want to make this team as a 6 wide receiver, obviously you got to show it on the offensive side of the ball. But that added special teams value can really, really help. Moving over to defense, because we're going to talk offensive line last. Moving over to defense. I think the guys that impressed me the most, David Ojabo and Trenton Simpson. Ojabo did not show up on the stat sheet. He did not have a tackle in this game, but he was getting quarterback pressure after quarterback pressure. He was putting his full array of pass rushing moves on display. This was his first game back, cleared for game action, and this was about as good as a performance as you could have hoped to see if you were the Ravens. This is exactly the type of guy that you need to step up with Jadeveon Clowney now in Carolina, Odafe Owe getting a bit of a promotion. David Ojabo is one of the keys to this Ravens defense. If it doesn't work out for him, you might have to bring somebody else in. I was really, really, really impressed with what David Ojabo had to bring to the table today. And I thought that he showed a lot of potential. We've seen him show flashes in game action during the regular season, but obviously, as is with a lot of these players, the big question is health. And how can these guys step up and perform with their health? I think for Ojabo, if he can stay on the field, he has a good shot to contribute in a really big way. Trenton Simpson also showing those pass coverage chops off. I think when you talk about the performance and the similarities and differences between Patrick Queen and Trenton Simpson, Patrick Queen struggled in coverage. He wasn't like abysmal, but he wasn't wonderful. Trenton Simpson, he's very good in pass coverage. And I think that's one of the biggest differences we'll see from Patrick Queen to Trenton Simpson. And there will obviously be some level of growing pains. But from what we've seen in these, week 18 against the Steelers and then these two preseason games, Trenton Simpson looks the part. And starting next to Roquan is only going to elevate him even more. But we know for years the Ravens have struggled to defend running backs, tight ends out of the backfield. And Patrick Queen is included in that conversation. But Trenton Simpson, to me, he can be the guy that you can put up because Kyle Hamilton, right? He's going to be able to cover those guys as well. But you have an extra guy in Trenton Simpson that can do that for you as well. Other players I thought performed on the defensive side of the ball. Bo Braid, I thought, was everywhere. Major shout out to him. And then, of course, I think Pepe Williams, despite having that penalty, I thought that he overall is a blitzer. He was great. We know that that's going to be a staple again of the Ravens defense this season is those defensive back blitzes with Arthur Millette out. It's going to be Ardarius Washington, Pepe Williams. They were trying Ardarius Washington more at safety, Pepe Williams more at corner. I think both those guys have a really good shot to make the roster. Adisa Isaac, before leaving, ended up playing really well, I thought. Had a couple of really nice flashes, which, again, is great to see. Tavius Robinson, as I mentioned, played well. Even though the defensive line wasn't wonderful, I thought Brent Urban had a couple of really nice plays. Jalen Armour Davis had a nice pass breakup in there. So there were a lot of guys that stepped up. I thought it was really good. But there were other areas where the Ravens did struggle. And coming up with the second part of the show, we are going to be talking about that a little bit more. The offensive line, as promised, will be our first topic of conversation. And then we'll move in to some of the run defense and what happened there as well. Stay tuned. We got a lot to get to on this instant reaction live game day edition of Locked On Ravens. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. First, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. And for me, it's MLB season, right? The Orioles in the thick of their playoff hunt. And I love going to baseball games. I have for forever now, really. And I try to get to a couple per season even now. But Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace from Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views from receipt, and the lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Gametime app has a bunch of awesome deals on there for MLB games. The Orioles with a couple of really important home series coming up for their playoff race. The Ravens, obviously, you can get tickets over on Gametime as well. And on the Gametime app, there are a bunch of features, such as last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. And the app is just really easy to use in general. One of my favorites of it is the ability to just be able to navigate it really easily. Plus, other features include flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, which you have to turn on to have that feature, but also seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guess we're going to buy MLB tickets with Gametime. Down the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Turn on Spy Game, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKED on NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today, last-minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. We return our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you after the Ravens defeat the Atlanta Falcons 13-12 in week 2 of the preseason. Appreciate everybody for being here. We do 5 days a week of Ravens coverage here on Locked On Ravens. Plus, we do bonus episodes like these instant reaction live streams. We go live after every single Ravens game as well, but also after every single piece of Ravens big news. So tell a friend, tell the family member, we have you covered over here on Locked On Ravens. Now, as promised, we will talk about the offensive line. There were certainly some issues today on the offensive line. Andrew Voorhees got beaten really badly on a sack by Ruka Horoho, who is the Falcons' second-round pick out of Clemson this year. He got beat very badly. But that was not wasn't even really the tip of the iceberg for the offensive line. Ben Cleveland had a horrendous snap that resulted in a turnover. John Harbaugh was mad about it, I think, for the entire game after it happened. He got up on the podium and was still pretty fuming about it on the podium when speaking to the media. So, I get it. John Harbaugh, if you get in that John Harbaugh doghouse, it is very hard to get out. I wouldn't necessarily put Cleveland in the doghouse, but look, that's not helping anybody. Like that's one of the worst plays you can have, puts people in danger. It is one of the worst plays in football that you can have. You ended up losing, however many yards it was, even if you got the ball back. And obviously it didn't really get the job done in this one either. You can't have plays like that. Cleveland in the center position, I don't know why they're not playing him at guard. I would have thought that if they really truly believed in him at the right guard spot, that, you want to get him reps there. But I don't know. Daniel Falele was the guy again, and he looked slow. It wasn't all bad. I'm not saying every snap was bad, but in this offense as a guard, you have to be able to pull. You have to be able to do it. You have to be able to get into space. You have to be able to move. You have to be able to get to your guy in time. We saw a really good job of that from Andrew Voorhees in week 1 of the preseason. It seemed like his timing when he was pulling out, getting into space, switching sides of the field, he looked good, and he was getting that timing was perfect. But then you have like today with Falele where he can't get to his guy in time, and that ruins an entire run play. And Derrick Henry is a good enough running back to negate some of that, but you want to have your best combination out there. And it's tough because, I think you feel confident enough in Andrew Voorhees. I thought Roger Rosengarten was fine today as well. Even though Voorhees had the bad play, Rosengarten had, a couple not so great ones. The pass pro is as advertised with Roger Rosengarten. I think through these first 2 games, we have seen Roger Rosengarten do a really good job of sliding his feet, moving his feet. The foot speed we know has been there. The pass protection, clean streak, obviously dating back to college, has been there. But with right guard, I think it told you something that they were going and sniffing around offensive linemen. They bring in a bunch of guys every offseason, late training camp bodies, whatnot. But the fact that they went out there and got Connor Williams in for a visit, obviously they didn't sign him, but they got him in for a visit. I think a guy like that who you would sign to start, you would start Connor Williams on this line. You would start him at right guard. That's where you'd start him. The fact that they were sniffing around, I have to assume that probably means that they don't feel 100% confident in where they are at that right guard spot, because is it Patrick McCary who slides over there? Does Josh Jones get an opportunity? Or do they just roll with Falele and say, you know what, whatever happens, happens. But here's the thing. You got to go up against the Chiefs defensive line, and for inexperienced guard combo of Andrew Voorhees and Daniel Falele, that scares me a little bit. When you talk about having Chris Jones on that Chiefs defensive line in week 1 and Daniel Falele is showing in the preseason that, going up against some of these second, third stringers is not really working out. Well, Chris Jones is not a second or third stringer. Let's just leave it at that. So the offensive line, you're set at left tackle and center. That's obvious. I don't have to tell anybody that. Left guard, I think you're pretty set too. Even though Voorhees had the bad play, I think overall he's been very solid. Rosengarten is going to have his moments, but the pass protection looks as advertised, and Rick says it right here. Rosengarten looks good for a rookie. I agree with you 100%. I think he's your starting right tackle. But that right guard position, man, it gives me worry. The edge, like coming out of this, or I guess going into it first, the edge position, the backup quarterback position, and the right guard position. Those were the three positions I was looking out for and saying, how good or bad am I going to feel about this position coming out of this game? Well, coming out of the game, I felt great about the edge rushing depth. I felt better about the backup quarterback spot. And I did not feel any better whatsoever. I felt worse about the right guard situation. So I don't know what they do. I don't even know who's available. I'll quickly look it up. I'll quickly look up who's available. I don't think there's anybody. The issue is offensive line depth, and I've talked about this for years on this show. Offensive line depth is really hard to come by, especially when you get to this point, because everybody needs it. Everybody's looking for it. And that's why you see the market on offensive linemen be pretty exorbitant when it comes to price point in free agency. We saw Robert Hunt get $100 million from Carolina. Damian Lewis got 50, 60 million from Carolina as well. And then that's also why with trades, you have to give up a pretty premium to go and get a guy. Like, that to me is where you're kind of just, you got to roll with what you have to an extent. And looking up, let's see, free agents, offensive linemen. You're seeing me do research in real time over here. Free agent offensive lineman. Let's still available. Let's see who it is. Oh, nope, they gave me defensive lineman. That type in offensive lineman, they give you a defensive lineman. Connor Williams was, I think, the biggest fish on the market. But right now there's not really anybody there. I mean, in terms of guards, I'm literally not even seeing names. Matt Filer, Mason Cole, but he's more of a center option. Brian Allen, but he's more of a center option. It's mostly tackles. I mean, it's Bakhtiari, Charles Leno, Dwayne Brown, Galinsky, I guess, is a guy you could bring in. But is that a needle mover? So that's going to be the thing. And I see Ravens 76 be more here. He says, I still can't believe we let Kevin Zeitler walk. If they had just brought back Kevin Zeitler, you're feeling like 10 million times better about this line. I get that they wanted to get younger. I get that, maybe they didn't want to pay the money or whatever. I would have personally paid the money. But an offensive line of Stanley, Voorhees, Linderbaum, Zeitler, Rosengarten, that sounds really, really good. That sounds really good. But we're not there. And it kind of stings a little more that the position that Kevin Zeitler played is the one that there is so much uncertainty over. So we will see what ends up happening with the offensive line. But for now, I think they have 4 of their 5 spots pretty locked in. 2 of them definitely locked. Another 2 pretty much locked. But that right guard position, you got to have 5. You play 5. So we'll see what happens there. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we'll be diving more into who performed well, who didn't, what comes next, get into our live chat a little bit more as well. So stay tuned. We got so much to talk about on this Instant Reaction live edition of Locked On Ravens. So don't go anywhere. Of course, we got plenty more Ravens content coming your way. First, this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has tools that find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And for me, I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, finding jobs, networking, connecting. LinkedIn has it all over there. And LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. They give a month over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified count within 24 hours. Hire professionals like professional on LinkedIn. Plus 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Push your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to push your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We are back. Our final part of Locked On Ravens here. Kevin Ostreicher rounding out this live edition show with you. Really appreciate all the support here. Again, I just hit my 5 years on Locked On Ravens under a week ago. It's been an incredible journey from 2019 to now. I can't wait to keep going here on this show and on this network. And we have a lot coming your way in terms of big, awesome content this year, Ravens-wise. We're going to have game day episodes, so 6 a.m. on game days, but this is more so for Sunday stuff, right? We're going to have game day episodes on Sunday coming out at 6 a.m. We're going to have our live reaction streams. We have plenty of guests coming up as well. So really appreciate it. Be sure to like, subscribe, video form, audio form. Tell a friend, tell a family member. If they want Ravens coverage, we have them covered 5 days a week plus more on Locked On Ravens. And be sure to follow me over on social media, Twitter at CashRicker34. On Instagram, trying to build that up, trying to get to 1,000 followers. So be sure to subscribe over there at CashRicker34 as well, or follow along over there. Man, this game, I think, was one where you got to see a lot of positive trends. Obviously, there were some negative ones, and I think the other negative one was the run defense. The Ravens were getting dominated at the point of attack a lot. And I thought that we did see flashes from guys like Travis Jones. We saw flashes from Brent Urban, Broderick Washington had, his situations as well. But I think overall, I am pretty happy with what we saw. I'm pretty happy with it. So I think moving forward, there are still a couple of battles because over the course of the preseason, you do have positions that kind of sort themselves out pretty quickly. And then there are ones that you have to go the entirety of the preseason knowing. And now that there's one less preseason game from 4 to 3, you have even less time to evaluate these guys. I still think we do need one more week of the backup quarterback position battle. And we'll see what happens with Josh Johnson in that. But if I had to assume, I'd assume they'd probably go in with him as the starter. Starter for the last preseason game. Maybe he'll get like a drive. I also wouldn't be shocked. Here's what I'm looking for. You want to know what I'm looking for? If Josh Johnson doesn't play in the final preseason game, they feel confident. If he does not. If he does, then he might be fighting for something. Might be fighting for, are they going to bring in somebody else or not? But I thought Emory Jones looked good. Devin Leary, there just wasn't as much of an opportunity. I think Owen Wright, even though his stats weren't great, look, one of the best traits you can have is availability. And Rasheen Ali was not available, and it seems like he and Owen Wright are fighting for that number 3 running back spot. And right now, based off of his preseason performance last week, based off of training camp, and the fact that he was able to get in the end zone today, I think Owen Wright is pretty far ahead. If I had to make, and we stay tuned because we're going to have roster predictions coming up on Locked On Ravens. If it's not this week, it will be next week after the final preseason game. But right now, if I had to make a 53-man roster, Rasheen Ali is not on it. And it makes me feel like that's even a bigger possibility because, as I've said, if you're an everydayer, you've heard me say this, Eric DeCosta is not afraid to move off of draft picks, particularly in the 5th round. And if this happens again, man, Eric DeCosta in the 5th round just do not get along if that's the case. Because we had the Kyle Blue Kelly situation last year where he got cut before the season started. Obviously, Ben Mason and Sean Wade both got moved off of as well. His first 5th round pick, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Dalen Mack. That might be a throwback name here. So could be. Just look, Eric DeCosta is a great GM, but every GM has their weakness. And for Eric DeCosta, it might be the 5th round. I pulled stats on that about a year ago. But I would not put Rasheen Ali on my 53-man right now. I'd put Owen Wright on it over him. So we'll see how that pans out. That last wide receiver spot, if they keep 6, is going to be huge. That's like, again, 6 guys competing for one spot. Maybe they like guys enough where they will keep 7. We'll see. I'm not ruling that out. But I think that, in my opinion, I'd probably keep 6. Offensive line, the right guard position is something we obviously got to keep watch out for here, especially with Falele not doing anything to pull away in that competition whatsoever. Pass rushers. Pass rushers is a big one. I don't know if we're going to see David Ojabo again. I would personally play him for probably a quarter in the final preseason game. But if you don't want to risk the health, I get it. I get it. If you don't want to risk the health in the final preseason game, I understand. Trenton Simpson, I would assume, is probably done for the preseason. I'd be pretty shocked if he played. He looks everything and more. I think he's done. Cornerback-wise, it's really going to be about the slot competition. Pepe Williams, I think, is kind of penciled in as that, but Ardarius Washington can certainly be that corner safety hybrid who can play in the slot before Arthur Millette comes back. Jalen Armour Davis, So to me, it just feels like there are a lot of solved things, right? I think Andrew Voorhees solved the left guard competition. I think Trenton Simpson put any doubts to rest about if he could contribute to this team this season. He looks ready to go. There have been position battles. There have been players. They have solved the questions, or those battles have been solved. But this last preseason game, you're going to have to answer about 10 different questions. And they all have to be, because training camp is now over. We did an episode with Kaji Ismail yesterday, our final winners and losers from training camp. Q was out at training camp, obviously. He had great insight on literally almost every single player on the roster. He put out everything that was in his mind, and it was a great episode, so be sure to check that out. But training camp is done, right? Last day of fans was Thursday. They're back into regular season mode. They're gearing up right now. So we're gonna figure out what this roster looks like in the next couple of weeks. But I don't think it's necessarily gonna be roster surprises. I think it'll more so be positional surprises. Guys that start over certain guys that get more playing time over other guys early. One other guy I will mention that I'm disappointed, and obviously health has a factor in this as well. But Tez Walker apparently has not had a very good training camp. He was the star of mini camps, of OTAs, but he apparently has not had a great training camp. He's had maybe 1 or 2 days where he's flashed here and there, but he has not gotten any run basically in the preseason. Now, part of that, again, has to do, he's been dealing with, I believe it's a rib thing. So that's unfortunate. But man, I was expecting more like that. When I have guests on and when I ask them, when I kind of go through it myself, who do you think, like I ask, who do you think you maybe expected more from, but you didn't really see it? I think Tez Walker's been one of those guys. I think Rasheen Ali's been another that I was expecting more from, but we haven't really seen it. And obviously that also has to do with the injury situation. Now, just perusing through a little bit on Twitter and looking, and I see an NRA right here saying, decent team. There's some things that need to be worked on. The kicker's new kicking rules messed up in the first game. Reliable center. That's not McCary. Yeah, the kickoff rule is another big one. I'm curious. We are live here, right? In the chat, how do you feel about the new kickoff rule? Let's do a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is you hate it. 10 is you love it. We've been through 2 weeks of this. We've seen it in action live for 2 weeks now with the Ravens. Do you like the rule or do you hate the rule? 1 to 10. 1, you hate it. 10, you love it. What's kind of your consensus? I'll give mine while we get some responses in. I'm like it's a 4 for me. Like it's an adjustment thing, right? It's an adjustment. I'm gonna get there. I think it does add excitement to the game. Don't get me wrong. I think that is true. Where whatever returner, because usually in the old kickoff rules, there was kind of just like this, okay, this is going to get to like the 20 or the 25, maybe the 30 if we're lucky, and it's going to be like whatever. With this new rule, I certainly sense like whenever the ball is kicked off, I certainly sense like this feeling, at least for me, which is like, oh wow, I don't know what's going to happen here, because there's still so many new things that are going on. So I don't hate it. All right. I do not hate it. I just think there needs to be, at least for me, I just need to adjust to it a little bit more. And that's all it is, right? I'm not knocking it. I'm not saying it's bad, but I just need more time to adjust, because there are all these different nuances. And Joe making the point right here. We now have to understand the rules of it, which is you have to declare beforehand that you're doing an onside kick. So there are no more surprise onside kicks. So the Falcons, everybody was wondering, well, are they going to do the onside kick? And so everybody who was watching, there was no announcement. So everybody knew at the time that there was no onside kick that was going to happen, because the Falcons didn't announce it. So you have to say, yeah, onside kick is happening now. But yeah, I see Cam saying 8 does encourage less touchbacks. Rick saying he liked the original, but touchbacks every time sucked. Yeah, I mean, look, this does add more excitement. I definitely think. And yeah, this point here by Sean is an interesting one, because I'll even expand on this a little bit for what Sean had to say. It's just different personnel that's on the field, right? Where when you were back at the 30, right? When you were kicking off from there, the 35, there were different types of personnel that you wanted to have out there. You wanted to have defensive backs, wide receivers, a tight end here. Now, if you are setting up to tackle a kickoff, you want to have like some speedy inside linebackers, which were still prevalent in the old kickoff rules. But now maybe you want to have some extra, like, is it a fast edge? Like, do you want a fast edge out there? It's different in terms of the personnel. And yep, Sean, exactly. You're exactly right. It is situational because there are so many. Justin Tucker said he had 8 or 9 kickoffs or something that he has at his disposal this season. So that is one big factor in this whole situation as well. But man, the Ravens, they get the chip off their shoulder, even though there's not really a preseason chip, right? They win. They beat the Falcons 13-12. Plenty of things to take away. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in to this live stream today. Be sure to, again, like, subscribe in video form and audio form as well. Be sure to do that as well. We have the same show for you, both audio and video form. Come up tomorrow. We're going to have a bonus episode coming out. So Sunday, 6 a.m. it'll be out. We'll do another stock report, winners, losers, stock up, stock down from this preseason game. Dive into even more depth on who performed well and who did not. So again, really appreciate everybody. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.